My guest today on Blood Money is Sean Hoffman, a serial entrepreneur who has had all the success in the world building and selling businesses, living an idyllic life in Southern California that would be the envy of many. In fact, he strikes me as the last person that will want to get involved in the full contact sport information warfare that is happening on the battlefields of the American conscience. Yet Sean is using his financial resources and connections to launch a media machine, first with his podcast Reality and many other planned projects, with the hope that he can influence the American narrative towards a positive direction and away from the current agenda of authoritarianism and control. Sean, I want to thank you for coming on this podcast, and I'd love for you to do an intro about who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks for having me, Vem. At a pretty young age, I came from a family of entrepreneurs and people who started small businesses and basically created wealth from the ground up. And I spent my entire life doing that. And I've started 3 companies, sold 2 of them, and just kind of enjoyed my Southern California life. I'm married and have a family and just really loved living the American dream. And then like most people, I was sort of forced into waking up to a new reality during the COVID pandemic, where I saw our liberties, our civil liberties being destroyed, taken away, deleted by supposedly the freest government on the face of the earth, and I saw that there was a sort of a class system where there were people in where I live in Southern California that their jobs were taken away, their small businesses were taken away because of under the guise of COVID, and safety and security. So they started putting these mandates, as we all know, especially in California, which we still have these mandates in effect. And depending on where you were on the socioeconomic scale, depending on what kind of freedoms you had and have even to today. And I found that appalling. I saw it as it's just the destruction of everything that I known and loved about my life and where I am. And it just felt wrong seeing people for no real reason for a disease that basically that they call a pandemic, that basically 99.9% of people survive, being put into a line waiting for a box of food from a local church. So they went from having their families in thriving or working that American dream to the dream being destroyed, and the government wanting us to thank them for managing what they had destroyed with these people and their lives. It sort of stole my happiness away, knowing that there was this alternate universe created by these sort of mini tyrants like our Governor Gavin Newsom and many others.
Yeah. It's funny because I just saw a picture of him at a some sports event where there's like 50,000 people, and him and Magic Johnson are standing there without a mask while 4-year-olds are berated for not wearing their mask.
Exactly. And so the hypocrisy, of course, we know about him going up to Napa, the French Laundry, and in the height of the Delta variant, and with a group of people and unmasked eating. And we saw Nancy Pelosi at a hair salon, not masked. And I guess it's what's surprising to me, and I have many people in my family and many people I know, obviously, and have worked with that are Democrats and support the Democrat Party and give large amounts of money to the Democrats, and yet they somehow are blinded to this reality.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, there's that famous picture in the late 30s where everybody's saluting Adolf Hitler except for one guy who's got his arms crossed and unwilling to do that. And you wonder how come he, out of like this group of like seemed like 1,000 people, why is there only one individual rebelling against such obvious fascism?
Exactly. And it's obviously some sort of a psychological disease, a social psychological disease, industrial psychological problem that we've seen many times. We saw it during the Bolshevik Revolution. Obviously, we saw it, as you just stated, with the National Socialist Party of Germany, in that people tend to just turn a blind eye. It's George Carlin made a funny joke in 1999 in his stand-up, which I was a big fan, or am a big fan, and he said that Americans will trade their freedoms away for the illusion of security. Mm-hmm. And it was prophetic, of course, like all of his stuff that we saw after 9/11, Some of our freedoms were taken away. They used COVID. Our more freedoms are taken away. And it's this talk about progressive. It's a progressive movement because they know that people will rather live in that matrix, in that fantasy world, than to go head on against the machine. I just couldn't, there's something inside of me that just could not let that happen. And so I started educating myself as to what was happening. And I do know a lot of people in various industries that are tied. I know people that are directly tied to our governor, Gavin Newsom. And I began to learn things over this COVID period that were kind of shocking to me. And just like you, and this is one of the things that I like about you, Vem, is that you don't just put a lot of conjecture out there or conspiracy theories. You actually are very measured with how you deliver the information. And I'm learning from that. And what I want to do is use my resources, use my contacts and my abilities to uncover, to reveal. It's funny, apocalypse, the Greek word actually means to pull back the curtain, to reveal something. And I almost feel like we're sort of in an apocalyptic time right now where everything is being revealed as a result of this. Having resources and contacts, people that actually know Gavin Newsom. I have a friend that knew Gavin Newsom's father, who passed away. I've learned that there's an aristocracy, that there's a network within at least the state of California, and I would imagine elsewhere, that is corrupt. And it has a very clear mission in creating a controlled environment. I don't think that they see themselves as communists or even socialists. Really, I don't think that they really are ideologues as much as they are in want and need in their minds to control their society, their constituents. And it's shocking to me how there are a lot of people that you would think otherwise would have strong ethics regarding this, that know this information, that tend to, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil when it comes to this. And it's not really affecting, and I have been feeling bad about this. It's not really affecting my existence too much. I mean, I have been going to dinner to certain restaurants, for instance, where they didn't require, even in the height of this, they didn't require masks. They didn't require anything of people. You kind of get a pass in a certain socioeconomic arena, and everybody kind of knows what's really happening, but they let it happen anyway. And I just couldn't do that because I was watching on the local news, like I said earlier, people that were hardworking family people, middle class people that were working just weeks prior, and then weeks later they had to actually wait in a car line to pick up food. They had to get all sorts of government help to survive. And I just said, that's enough. So I'm, a person, and anybody that really knows me knows that I'm a person that will fight till the ends of the earth for what I believe in.
Why are you, I mean, looking at your profile, there's a lot of people that have your level of success that are accomplished people that are just enjoying their lives and being, cooperative with essentially what is really a caste system. Why are you so brave?
Well, I think that it comes from my core beliefs. I'm a Christian. I think I'm a patriot. I know I'm a patriot. It's the foundation of who I am, and I can't turn a blind eye to injustice or the weak or innocent being damaged, being attacked by the powerful. I just can't turn a blind eye to that. And I think that what I've been tasked to do by God, by country, by by just my moral foundations is to uncover this information, to disseminate the information, get it out there in many different ways, and start waking everybody up, forcing them to wake up to what is happening, which is a tyrannical group of people. And it's really interesting that a lot of these people aren't that strong. They're not that wealthy, actually, but they work together beautifully, and they all have the same mission. I believe that they are also sort of in a type of religion or cult, if you will, and are controlled by even more powerful people. And so I think what needs to happen now is we need to end this tyranny in modern times. And the only thing that I can do to do that is either take massive legal actions, which cost a lot of money and usually don't really go anywhere within our court system, or get this information out, organize with other people like yourself, Em, to learn more, create more content, and let people know that what's happening is not a conspiracy theory. It's not somebody with a tinfoil hat in their mom's basement that has no real comprehension of anything, is on some sort of psychotropic drug regimen. It's not the case. There's people like yourself, like me, that are seeing, and there's a lot of other people I know. Some don't want to be made public, but they know, and they are actually as concerned as I am regarding this, and they want to get this information out, and they want to fight that sort of dark force that's happening in the world right now. So my incentive is just so that I can live with myself, so that when I'm on my deathbed, I'll know that I did the right thing. And I
So,
think that that's what more people have to start waking up to.
so let me ask you something about, like, you and I think have an understanding of the judicial system and why it is difficult to go through the courts. Could you enlighten the listeners as to, when you say that, it is a challenge to take this through the court system? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the court system, first of all, in a court, it's not. If you've ever been in a legal battle of any kind, you understand that there's certain rules first when it comes to going through the court system, in that you have to convince a lower court, and you have to have enough evidence and support for whatever complaint you're making on a particular subject. And then what you have is, especially when you're dealing with somebody that's powerful, has a lot of money, they usually have very large law firms. Those law firms can inundate you with information, so much so that it could take years to go through that information. So in other words, if I want to go after somebody, like say a social services, or I want to go after a government agency and say, look, they're misspending money, and or a corporation, and they're misusing funds, or they're perhaps even laundering money or embezzling money, what they will do in response is that law firm will give us boxes of information in that discovery, of useless information that we have to sift through, which takes years and takes many attorneys and accountants to go through it. And then once you get through that and you go to, say, a jury, they will make it, they can twist the reasoning behind the financial improprieties that they've done. So they will actually take that information, they can twist it so much. It's kind of like when they said recently that and I know this for a fact, the biggest mistake that the Democrats made when they went after Trump in New York for his taxes was that it was hundreds of thousands of pages of taxes and documents, and that the juries and that the people at large would not be interested in that information, which is true. And so then you take something that's evil, that's happening in the world, and it's usually for money. It's usually for profit. It's usually for something. So if you're going to go after somebody, you have to follow the money. And in doing so, you end up in a very long, very elaborate, very expensive court battle. And that's just at the lower court. And then, of course, you have political courts, you have judges that can steer a jury. They can control the courtroom pretty well. And if you get the wrong judge who isn't reasonable or fair, and there are those that aren't, obviously we've seen that in the Supreme Court recently, they will find a way of manipulating that court situation where you have to then either appeal it or take it to a higher court, which is, again, going through the entire process again that I just mentioned. And so I'm not an attorney. I've worked with a lot of attorneys. I've dealt with court battles in the past, and it's not easy. Now, you talk about going after a major organization, a big bank. I've never gone after $1 trillion organization or a massive governmental entity. And so if you just let that marinate for a second as to what it takes to go through the court system, the different barriers that you're going to run into, especially political ones, it's really, really hard. And you do lose your audience. I mean, journalists, it's a very boring subject, actually, most of the time, unless it's a criminal case and it's a murder case and it's something really simple. But in the things that we're talking about, to go after these entities that are corrupt, to go after these people that are corrupt, it's a long process. And then the last thing, Vem, I'll say in that long diatribe about that is that while you're spending those years going after these people in court and spending millions of dollars to do it, what are they doing? They're continuing to run their criminal enterprise, or they're doing the same things they've been doing anyway, and they're furthering that agenda. So it seems better to spend the money and the energy and all the resources on illuminating, shedding light on those things, because that's what's powerful. Because when enough people wake up to something horrific happening in their midst, they'll react, and they'll react in the voting booth. They'll react a number of different ways, and that's what sways the pendulum.
So what you described is basically something that's unlawful, called legal attrition or war of attrition. Why is it that that alone is not punished? Why is it that when a law firm is clearly just putting garbage forward just to make sure that it's boxes and boxes of information that drag things out for years and years, why is it that that's not stopped as it happens?
Well, I think that the easiest answer for that is there hasn't been a law, whether it's in Sacramento at the state house or in D.C., that hasn't been written by a major law firm. The attorneys and the aides working for these Congress people and senators, they're not writing anything themselves. They don't. I can tell you, most of them aren't even reading the laws that they're voting on and signing. These are created by lobbyist firms, which are basically law firms, and they have created the system, just like the tax system in the United States. It's complexities for a purpose. It's not because they need to have such a complex penal code and such a complex civil code or tax code, but they do it so that they can manipulate the situation when need be. And everybody kind of knows that. They understand how that works, and they understand that most people don't have the attention span or the knowledge to be aware of what's actually happening. I'll give you an example. What I often talk about, which I think is funny, is people that I even know, or I should say, that aren't in business, that haven't ever connected with these people. They believe that the one great thing about the industrialized world, the United States, England, is that politicians are never on the take. They're never getting those briefcases full of cash, right, that you see in the third world. Well, in fact, they are, and everybody knows how that's done. So I have a corporation. I have a for-profit corporation. I'll set up a nonprofit corporation, and I'm going to call it, the Vem Miller Foundation. And the Vem Miller Foundation has my cousin running it. I'm not really connected with it, other than I support it because it does a lot of good things and it disperses money to a lot of great causes. And so I want a politician to pass a law. So I hire a lobbyist firm, and I say, I want everybody to buy my widget. I want everybody to buy my widget in the state of California because it helps them be safe. And the firm says, okay, well, that's to hire us and retain us and all the work that's going to take to do. We're going to need about $3 million. Okay. Here's $3 million. And then they go to work and they write a statute. They write into a law, a bill, and then they give it to the state legislature. They give it to the Congress, and then they start meeting with their contacts. And a lot of these people in the firm also were former Congress people or aides. They go in and they start pitching this law, and they say, look, another thing is that we'd like you to sign this law. It's a great thing. You just need to go ahead and sign it. By the way, the Vem Miller Foundation is having a graduation speech at Yale this week, and it's in front of the business law class. And we'd like you to come in and do a 15-minute speech. And of course, we'll pay you $250,000 for that 15-minute speech.
Oh,
okay.
man.
And
Yeah.
the politician says, okay, I'll go ahead and sign that law. And I will put in my book that I'm going to be at Yale to do that speech for the Vem Miller Foundation. That's great. And there's your briefcase full of cash. Now, that is usually too complex for most people to really wrap their minds around. And it happens every day. And so it's funny when people often say, well, how do these politicians that have been, career politicians their entire life, how do they create so much wealth? How do they accumulate so much wealth on a, $150,000 a year salary? Well, that's how. And that's why they do it. And again, the court system, remember, a lot of these judges, if they're local judges, they're voted in mostly. And if they're federal judges, or state judges, they're appointed. And they're appointed by those same crooked politicians.
So what do you think the solution is?
I think the solution is to basically undo, and this goes into a long subject. We have to undo, as you know. Did you ever read? I don't know if you ever read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals.
I haven't, no.
Okay, well, in that, he sort of basically elaborates on, I think it was a 1963 Communist Manifesto on how to like kind of take over a country. And he says certain specific things like change language, change the definition of words, demonize your opponent by labeling them with those words, racist, sexist, whatever it may be. And then the key is basically the minds of everybody, which is controlled by the educational system and the media. And so people have been programmed, even into social media now, they've been programmed to have a certain attention span, to focus on certain things. I mean, every show has been a cop show, right? I mean, that's on purpose. Government is good. You listen to authority, never question authority, and then also distraction. So the problem is the attention span and the scope of knowledge of the average person, the average American. I can't say the same for other countries, but the average American has been degraded over the past 50 years through this method. And to the point now where they feel emboldened to just give fake information out there. And the other thing is that I call it, my wife laughs, I always call it the Disney mentality, the Disneyland mentality. And a lot of adults tend to live in sort of fantasy land where they don't think that there is large scale corruption. They don't think that there would be evil pharmaceutical people that would knowingly distribute opiates so readily, knowing that hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people were going to die as a result of that. They believe the narrative because the alternative is too ugly to understand. And it's because of sort of a foundation, like I said, in the educational system, and then supported afterward in the media to suggest that everything's a conspiracy theory. Don't worry, the government's got your best interest at heart. Big corporations have your best interest at heart, and they're going to take care of you. And that these human beings, these greedy, morally bankrupt human beings that are in these situations, they somehow are on a moral high ground. And I think that to answer your question, what do? We have to reverse that process. I see people like Charlie Kirk, who I donated a lot to from the beginning. He does Turning Point. What they do is they go to, I think they're in a couple thousand different high schools and colleges, and they try and sort of do this anti-propaganda. They try and give truthful information, real information, educate people. And it's working. It's working actually. Young people, so that they start to see the reality. And reality and truth have become offensive. That's how much they've twisted the narrative, how much they've twisted our ability to understand what is real and what is not, is the fact that things that we say, oftentimes, we used to say that people were fat, right? The Bible says gluttony, right? The person's gluttonous, they're fat. And there was shame in being fat. And now that's offensive. In some places, that could get you kicked out of school, calling somebody fat. That could get somebody suspended for saying something. We, through this sort of Oprah Winfrey generation, we've become so convoluted in what is in our realities that up is down and down is up. So the key is to undo that. It's to find different mediums in different ways, and that's what I think is great about your stuff is that how the craft of keeping people's attention while delivering this truth, this information, and that's what I want to put my resources towards is getting the information, putting it out there, and then being ready for the fight. There's obviously a cancel culture, and a lot of people like myself are afraid of being canceled. They're afraid of their businesses being attacked. They're afraid of financial hardship from dealing with whatever may come at them. It's just sort of the boogeyman. For many reasons, I'm not afraid of that, and I will fight back. And if you're gonna come at me and cancel me, believe me, I'll put all my resources and everything I can to come at you. And I think that's what our side has to do, is we have to say, no, enough. This is the truth. This is reality. Gravity exists whether you like it or not. And we're no longer going to ignore things that are really evil in our world just because it's comfortable, just because we have some sort of undefined fear of that boogeyman that's going to come at us. I think that we have to just get that information out, and good people have to use their talents, use their resources, and get this information out. It's an information war. It's truth versus lies. That's what this is all about. It's all about programming people to become sort of dutiful, mindless drones that follow whatever narrative, parrot the narrative, and respond exactly the way they want them to. So that's what's happening. And to you and myself, I mean, some of these things might seem simple, like the paying off of the politicians through the Van Miller Foundation at Yale, right?
Yeah.
But it's like that to a lot of people is unthinkable. In fact, they can't even wrap their minds around it. I've talked to a few people that I know that are educated people, and they still have sort of a puzzled look on their face when I've told them that that's exactly how it happens.
I mean, we keep hearing this phrase like "take big money out of politics." Is one of the solutions just abolishing this idea of lobbies and having, the people be the lobby, so the people's voice is now equal, as opposed to this caste system where the wealthy, powerful are able to have their voices be heard through financing?
Yes, the answer is yes. Yeah, no, that's what has needed to happen for a very long time. So it's that needs to happen, and then also too, I think transparency of the bureaucracies. I don't know if you're familiar with. I know you've traveled a lot, but in France, I have friends that are half their family lives in France, and they go there constantly, and they have businesses in France. When you pay your income tax, you get your tax returns back. It basically just gives you everything. It just gives you a copy of what you basically sent in and that they verified. In France, what they do is when you pay your taxes and you get that return back, or you even get the tax bill, for instance, it states exactly where percentage-wise, dollar-wise, your tax dollars went.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
It is interesting, and it's part of transparency. And I think that the bureaucracies within our government, from the educational system to the FBI, have become so powerful in themselves that they control the politicians. I can tell you, which we're going to be talking about with other people. I know firsthand that the NIH and the National Institute of Infectious Disease and Allergies, they lobby senators, they lobby politicians with the money that they get from the government.
Wow.
And so they use the same things. They go through these lobbying firms. So these bureaucrats like Tony Fauci, they control huge war chests of money that they can use for legal causes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they lobby these senators on both sides of the aisle. It's not necessarily, it's actually a lot of Republicans as well that are lobbied by these entities. And then they give more money to that entity. Now, I don't know if that's being done by these other agencies, but I would imagine that it is if it's being done by those.
So
right?
essentially, like Tony Fauci, who's obviously very interested in pushing this COVID agenda and having this never end. So you're telling me that he's able to lobby politicians through money in order to continue supporting that agenda?
Correct. And then those politicians sit on committees that control law enforcement, military. Think about that. They control law enforcement. So you can have, raids on people that make absolutely no sense based on the push from another government agency not liking what somebody's saying or doing. And that's scary. I mean, that's basically, Stalin and the former Soviet Union. That's how they operated, right? You show me a man, I'll show you a crime. So we've gotten to a point now where people are intimidated. I actually know a doctor, and she sits on the board, as a lot of doctors do actually, of the FDA, and she's highly credentialed, highly successful in Los Angeles, and is afraid to give out information. Is literally afraid for her safety, if you can believe that, to divulge things, afraid of what might happen, not knowing exactly what would happen, but they've seen people's clinics raided, they've seen IRS raids. They've seen FBI raids for various reasons. And even when you come out the other side of it clean, it's cost you, a couple $1 million in legal fees and destroyed your business. So we are literally living in a place of tyranny where we're under an authoritarian government right now as we speak. They don't have total control.
How does this make sense? That's what's baffling to me. How does it make sense to do this to your population, knowing that it's ultimately not good for the future of anybody?
Well, it's about control. And I think that what you have to do is you have to look past conspiracy. And Mark Twain, Samuel Langhorne Clemens, had a great line. Somebody asked him, what's the meaning of life, in one of his audiences? And he said, the meaning of life is to be born, pick a vice, and let it kill you. And that's basically it. So all of these people have vices, and one of the biggest vices among people that are highly driven, and this from I'm sure the entertainment industry, is greed and control and power. Greed and also control. They want to control everything in their environment, and they want the biggest piece of the pie. And I think that that's what it boils down to. And it goes to the top. You have huge mega corporations. And the difference between these corporations and even the company a lot of people work for, think they work for a big company that has a few hundred employees. No, there are corporations out there that are, and they're structured in such a way too, where they kind of keep the PR away from them by breaking up the company into, say, 10 different corporations in 10 different countries. But it's really the same entity. okay, in whether it's in finance or in media or whatever, and it protects them both, through the prism of the public and financially and legally. So what's happening is that people from the very top down, sort of a pyramid, if you will, right, pyramid scheme, they're greedy, and people get driven. They've had everything in life that they could want, and just like an alcoholic wants that drink or a drug addict wants that next hit, they want more control. And when they start to not have that control, they don't have that power, it scares them. And people, if the most frightening thing to these people would be the population in control, really in control in their minds. It's as scary as if a guy runs the factory and the factory workers are in control of how the factory is being operated and who's getting fired and who's getting hired and who's doing what. It's the CEO of that company would be jumping out of a building. Out of a window. He would be so freaked out. Well, that's how these people operate. I think largely the politicians are greedy, but they're more puppets. They're more grifters or con artists, most of them, literally. And people go in, most of them are attorneys, and they go into that field because they want to make wealth through by being that medium, by being that talking head that controls the populace, the people behind them that are pulling the strings, and those are the mega corporations. It's not really all that complex. I mean, since recorded history, wars and murders and all the bad things that we've seen in every country throughout the entire, like I said, recorded history has been about greed and power, and the power and control is to accommodate the greed. So
it seems like the first step is to get rid of lobbies, because that's how a lot of this stuff is done. And I'm just hearing you talk about these things. I identified two things, which is one, getting rid of the lobbies, and then essentially you have hidden monopolies. Now, big corporations with a lot of splinter, smaller corporations that to the public eye seem like just a bunch of smaller corporations and hence benign to a certain degree, but it's really this mega corporation at the top of it. How do you approach that issue in terms of monopoly laws?
Well, I think that I think we're close to approaching that situation. I think that that's why these bureaucracies, these government bureaucracies, and these unions have become so powerful. I think that they know, and I also think on a side note, that's why we're seeing all of this sort of these mandates and this authoritarian process just push into hyperspeed, because they know that the time is short for what they're doing and the gig is up. And so what they want to do is they want to establish an authoritarian or totalitarian regime, which is always backed by these bureaucracies. And it always starts with a certain degree of BS on the parts of the leaders, where they give the illusion that they're doing it for the people, and they're really not. And I'll give you an example. There's a Reader's Digest, I think from 1952, where Stalin is going into Czechoslovakia, and he's trying to take over or fold them into the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia. He uses that Lenin line when asked by the reporter. He said, well, how are you going to get this socialist party to go communist and to join, be another state within that Soviet Union? And he said, well, these are my useful idiots. And basically, I'm going to promise them everything. They will think it's okay to compromise their principles and to give up their power in order to get free education, free healthcare, the idea of safety and crime going down, and to be protected from the West, to be protected by the Soviet military. And he was right. And the socialists then basically turned into I don't even know if you call it real communism, but whatever the totalitarian regime of the Soviet Union was. And then those leaders that were in Czechoslovakia at the time, most of them ended up in the gulags. And it's the same thing, where now you don't even have, like in Soviet Union, you didn't, or in China, you really don't have politicians. You have a massive, powerful bureaucracy. And so they've created that in the background, that bureaucracy and that propaganda machines, because they know that eventually people are going to, especially with information being shared so readily, they know that people are going to say no. No more lobbyists, no more, if a law is written, let it be written in the halls of Congress. Let it be transparent to the people. And so now the bureaucracies, as we've seen, are taking over. OSHA, the FDA, the CDC, the FBI, the IRS. These bureaucracies have more power than our elected leaders often. So
you were mentioning that they're almost at the end of their line. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I think that one of the I always say that for every reaction there's obviously a reaction, right? An opposite and equal reaction, and that's what's happened. And I think through Trump being elected, he didn't. There's a whole subject about Trump, but I think that he basically disrupted that whole machine with his agenda was and what he did. And in doing so, he didn't only disrupt their machine, but he revealed it for what it is by their reaction towards him, and by like their reaction towards, like, say, these January 6th people or whatever it may be. And it really awakened a lot of people to the fact that there was corruption going on. And it made people want to research. It made people like myself say, "Wait, what's going on? We've totally thrown out the Bill of Rights. We have a Constitution. We have inalienable rights that are being shredded right before my eyes. What's happening?" And so people woke up, and I think that they know that all eyes are on them now. And of course, I believe that they blew this whole COVID thing out of proportion for the reason of creating these mandates, of building bureaucracies. They use any opportunity. If it was 9/11, George Bush administration used it to create the Department of Homeland Security and more laws and more control by the state. So they're using it to it now, like I said, at a hyper speed, because they know that more and more people through the information highway, the internet, people are waking up and they're getting information that they wouldn't have otherwise. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You have them being able to control the media in their minds, but they're really not. They're really not able to control the media. And now there's a secondary media that we're seeing emerge, like Joe Rogan, who has between 11 to 30 million people a day listening to him, and then you have CNN that has audiences in the hundreds of thousands now during their prime time. So it didn't quite work out the way that they wanted it to, because why? They're human beings. These are human beings, and they make mistakes. They did, especially when you rush something, and they rushed it because they panicked that it was over. It's kind of like this voting rights bill that they, if you've read any of it, they tried to pass, and then they tried to get rid of the filibuster that they've used over 100 times the past year, the Democrats in Congress. And they tried to pass this voting rights bill because they know that unless they can manipulate the situation on a wholesale level, they're going to start to lose power. And I think that the more information that people disseminate and the more people that wake up, the more power they lose and the more desperate they get. They're going to be like a cornered animal. And that cornered animal is just going to go berserk before it finally, goes away or dies.
I mean, which speaks to a lot about how YouTube and all the, I guess, the arm of the mainstream media, which is all these social media companies, are censoring anything that's a dissenting point of view so heavily.
Yes. Yeah. No, they're trying to. There's people out there that like myself, and we like, for instance, I didn't do any social media, and I used to joke with my wife that it was some sort of an arrested adolescent impulse by adults to be doing social media. There was no reason to do it. It was a waste of time, unless of course your purpose was to do what we're doing, or to sell a product or something. Like, I could, obviously, I believe in commerce, so I had never done this before, but I'd seen that Twitter was obviously deleting a lot of accounts, and I started on, I think, the last day of September. We started with Twitter, and now we're ventured off into other social media accounts, but went over all of their policies, read every Twitter policy, and understood exactly the line to cross. So everything that we create, everything that we put out there, and how we put it out in Twitter, or now on Instagram. We just started that a couple weeks ago. And so we're building up those audiences. These, again, people in Silicon Valley, they're not that smart. And these big corporations, and I used to go to Frisco all the time and knew a lot of people that were at Google. I knew people at YouTube. I know one person at Facebook. These are people that are kind of high up, and they have their own. These companies are so big, Vem, that they have their own internal issues, especially with the state of California the way it is, where the tail's sort of wagging the dog within these companies. Mm-hmm. And what's happening is you have these insane kind of quasi Antifa type ideologues that are in middle management, and they're basically intimidating the upper management and the board of these companies into having certain policies put into place, which obviously involves censorship. Mm-hmm. So and these people that have started these behemoth companies like Zuckerberg, he started in 2000. I think that's kind of why he's moving to Austin right now. I think they've just lost control. I really do. I think that it's almost like a revolution within these corporations. What's that?
Sorry to interrupt you, but on the Zuckerberg tip, you don't think he's moving to Texas to influence politics there? You think he's actually moving to Texas to get a less politically motivated group of staff?
I think it's both. I think first of all, I think that and he's a whole nother subject, but I think that he and a few others have taken huge investments and huge money and had a certain amount of control by foreign actors. I really do. I think that that's the case. I think he would probably see it differently. But that's really what's happened to a lot of these people. So yeah, he'll definitely try and push politics into more of a convoluted place, which would be more to the left, because that's what the left's doing right now. It's not the party of John F. Kennedy, I'll tell you that. Yeah, he's going to do that, but I also think it's also, and the same with Elon Musk. I do think that they tend to lose control in Silicon Valley. It's basically I mentioned the Bolshevik Revolution. It's that period of Russia where the workers are completely, and in Silicon Valley they're completely insane, and it's just this mass psychosis, and they're working within that industry, and they think that their duty, their mission, their God is that socialist, politically correct agenda. And they will just like a good dutiful cult. They're gonna make sure that nobody violates that. And what I was gonna say is the silver lining of those people running those companies is that they're stupid. Most of them aren't that sophisticated. They're not smart. They're not business savvy, because they do have sort of that tiny brain cult member type mentality. And so we can work around them. And that's the silver lining that I see with these social media companies. And I think what I like to do is dispel the fact that these people are scary. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of power, but they're just people that are basically morally bankrupt, leading these companies. Usually, in my opinion, in some cases, my knowing, are beholden to other actors that don't have America's best interest at heart.
Yes. Since the show's called Blood Money, I have to ask this question, which you've probably answered this throughout this interview. What does blood money mean to you? What is blood money?
Blood money is anything that you do to create wealth for yourself that compromises your principles, your morals, where you basically you're willing to sell your soul for money, and in doing so you're hurting other people very badly. I think that that's what blood money means to me. I think it's anything that you do where you compromise who you are to make money, for wealth.
Yeah, I thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for coming on Blood Money.
Thank you, Vim.
This is our second episode, so I'm so excited to have you on there. I think people are going to love what you have to say, and I look forward to doing more of these.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vim, for having me, and I look forward to the next one.